The Turkish invasion of Cyprus, launched on 20 July 1974, was a Turkish military invasion of the island country of Cyprus, which was carried out following the 1974 Cypriot coup d'état. The coup had been ordered by the military junta in Greece and staged by the Cypriot National Guard in conjunction with the OKAB. It opposed the Cypriot president Archbishop Makarios III and installed Proanosis Nikos Sampson. The aim of the coup was the annexation of the island by Greece, and the Hellenic Republic of Cyprus was declared. In July 1974, Turkish forces invaded and captured 3% of the island before a ceasefire was declared. The Greek military junta collapsed and was replaced by a democratic government. In August 1974, further Turkish invasion resulted in the capture of approximately 40% of the island. The ceasefire line from August 1974 became the United Nations buffer zone in Cyprus and is commonly referred to as the Green Line. More than 1/4 of the population of Cyprus was expelled from the occupied northern part of the island, where Greek Cypriots constituted 80% of the population. A little over a year later, in 1975, roughly 60,000 Turkish Cypriots, amounting to half the Turkish Cypriot population, were displaced from the south to the north. The Turkish invasion ended in the partition of Cyprus along the UN-monitored Green Line, which still divides Cyprus, and the formation of a de facto autonomous Turkish Cypriot administration in the north. In 1983, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus declared independence, although Turkey is the only country that recognizes it. The international community considers the TRNC's territory as Turkish-occupied territory of the Republic of Cyprus. The occupation is viewed as illegal under international law, amounting to illegal occupation of European Union territory since Cyprus became its member. The invasion's Turkish armed forces code name was Operation Attila. Among Turkish speakers, the operation is also referred as Cyprus Peace Operation or Cyprus Operation, considering that Turkey took military action on the pretext that the invasion can be considered a peacekeeping operation. Background: Ottoman and British rule. In 1571, the mostly Greek-populated island of Cyprus was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Following the Ottoman-Venetian War, the island and its population was later leased to Britain by the Cyprus Convention, an agreement reached during the Congress of Berlin in 1878 between the United Kingdom and the Ottoman Empire. Britain formally annexed Cyprus on 5 November 1914 as a reaction to the Ottoman Empire's decision to join the First World War on the side of the Central Powers. Subsequently, the island became a British Crown colony. Article 20 of the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 marked the end of the Turkish claim to the island. Article 21 of the treaty gave the minority Muslims on the island the choice of leaving the island to live as Turks in Turkey, or to stay on the island as British nationals. At this time, the population of Cyprus was composed by both Greeks and Turks, who identified themselves with their respective mother countries. However, the elites of both communities shared the belief that they were socially more progressive and therefore distinct from the mainlanders. Greek and Turkish Cypriots lived quietly side by side for many years. Broadly, three main forces can be held responsible for transforming two ethnic communities into two national ones: education, British colonial practices, and insular religious teachings accompanying economic development. Formal education was perhaps the most important, as it affected Cypriots during childhood and youth. Education has been a main vehicle of transferring intercommunal hostility. British colonial policies also promoted ethnic polarization. the British applied the principle of divide and rule, setting the two groups against each other to prevent combined action against colonial rule. For example, when Greek Cypriots rebelled in the 1950s, the Colonial Office expanded the size of the auxiliary police and in September 1955, established the Special Mobile Reserve, which was recruited exclusively from the Turkish community, to crush EOKA. This and similar practices contributed to intercommunal animosity. Failure to fully adopt secular practices also fostered ethnic nationalism, as the two main ethnic groups practiced their own distinct religions, with very little crossover. Although economic development and increased education reduced the explicitly religious characteristics of the two communities, the growth of nationalism on the two mainlands increased the significance of other differences. Turkish nationalism was at the core of the revolutionary program promoted by the father of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and affected Turkish Cypriots who followed his principles. President of the Republic of Turkey from 1923 to 1938, Atatürk attempted to build a new nation on the ruins of the Ottoman Empire and elaborated the program of 6 principles to do so. These principles of secularism and nationalism reduced Islam's role in the everyday life of individuals and emphasized Turkish identity as the main source of nationalism. Traditional education with a religious foundation was discarded and replaced with one that followed secular principles and, shorn of Arab and Persian influences, was purely Turkish. Turkish Cypriots quickly adopted the secular program of Turkish nationalism. Under Ottoman rule, Turkish Cypriots had been classified as Muslims, a distinction based on religion. Being thoroughly secular, Atatürk's program made their Turkish identity paramount, and may have further reinforced their division from their Greek Cypriot neighbors. 1950s. In the early 50s, a Greek nationalist group was formed called the Ethniki Organosis Kyprian Agoniston. Their objective was to drive the British out of the island first, and then to integrate the island with Greece. EOKA was a Greek nationalist organization. EOKA wished to remove all obstacles from their path to independence, or union with Greece. The first secret talks for EOKA, as a nationalist organization established to integrate the island to Greece, were started in the chairmanship of Archbishop Makarios III in Athens on 2 July 1952. In the aftermath of these meetings, a Council of Revolution was established on 7 March 1953. In early 1954, secret weaponry shipments to Cyprus started with the knowledge of the Greek government. Lt. Georgios Grivas, formerly an officer in the Greek army, covertly disembarked on the island on 9 November 1954, and EOKA's campaign against the British forces began to grow. The first Turk to be killed by EOKA on 21 June 1955 was a policeman. EOKA also killed Greek Cypriot leftists. After the September 1955 Istanbul pogrom, EOKA started its activity against Turkish Cypriots. A year later, EOKA revived its attempts to achieve the union of Cyprus with Greece. Turkish Cypriots were recruited into the police by the British forces to fight against Greek Cypriots. But EOKA initially did not want to open up a second front against Turkish Cypriots. However, in January 1957, EOKA forces began targeting and killing Turkish Cypriot police deliberately to provoke Turkish Cypriot riots in Nicosia, which diverted the British Army's attention away from their positions in the mountains. In the riots, at least one Greek Cypriot was killed, and this was presented by the Greek Cypriot leadership as an act of Turkish aggression. The Turkish Resistance Organization was formed initially as a local initiative to prevent the union with Greece, which was seen by the Turkish Cypriots as an existential threat due to the exodus of Cretan Turks from Crete once the union with Greece was achieved. It was later supported and organized directly by the Turkish government, and the TMT declared war on the Greek Cypriot rebels as well. On 12 June 1958, 8 Greek Cypriot men from Kondymnos village, who were arrested by the British police as part of an armed group suspected of preparing an attack against the Turkish Cypriot quarter of Skylura, were killed by the TMT near the Turkish Cypriot populated village of Gonyeli, after being dropped off there by the British authorities. TMT also blew up the offices of the Turkish press office in Nicosia to falsely put the blame onto the Greek Cypriots. It also began a string of assassinations and murders of prominent Turkish Cypriot supporters of independence. The following year, after the conclusion of the independence agreements on Cyprus, the Turkish Navy sent a ship to Cyprus fully loaded with arms for the TMT. The ship was stopped and the crew were caught red-handed in the infamous Deniz incident. 1960 to 1963 British rule lasted until 1960, when the island was declared an independent state under the London-Zurich agreements. The agreement created a foundation for the Republic of Cyprus by the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot communities. Although the Republic was seen as a necessary compromise between the two reluctant communities, the 1960 constitution of the Cyprus Republic proved unworkable, however, lasting only 3 years. Greek Cypriots wanted to end the separate Turkish Cypriot municipal councils permitted by the British in 1958, made subject to review under the 1960 agreements. For many Greek Cypriots, these municipalities were the first stage on the way to the partition they feared. The Greek Cypriots wanted an OSIS integration with Greece, while Turkish Cypriots wanted Taksim partition between Greece and Turkey. Resentment also rose within the Greek Cypriot community because Turkish Cypriots had been given a larger share of governmental posts than the size of their population warranted. In accordance with the constitution, 30% of civil service jobs were allocated to the Turkish community, even though at that time they only constituted 18.3% of the population. Additionally, the position of vice president was reserved for the Turkish population, and both the president and vice president were given veto power over crucial issues. 1963 to 1974 In December 1963, the President of the Republic Makarios proposed 13 constitutional amendments after the government was blocked by Turkish Cypriot legislators. Frustrated by these impasses and believing that the constitution prevented an OSIS, the Greek Cypriot leadership believed that the rights given to Turkish Cypriots under the 1960 constitution were too extensive and had designed the Ikritis Plan, which was aimed at reforming the constitution in favor of Greek Cypriots, persuading the international community about the correctness of the changes and violently subjugating Turkish Cypriots in a few days should they not accept the plan. The amendments would have involved the Turkish community giving up many of their protections as a minority, including adjusting ethnic quotas in the government and revoking the presidential and vice-presidential veto power. These amendments were rejected by the Turkish side and the Turkish representation left the government, although there is some dispute over whether they left in protest or whether they were forced out by the National Guard. The 1960 constitution fell apart and communal violence erupted on December 21, 1963, when 2 Turkish Cypriots were killed at an incident involving the Greek Cypriot police. Turkey, the UK and Greece, the guarantors of the Zurich and London agreements which had led to Cyprus's independence, wanted to send a NATO force to the island under the command of General Peter Young. Both President Makarios and Dr. Kukuk issued calls for peace, but these were ignored. Meanwhile, within a week of the violence flaring up, the Turkish army contingent had moved out of its barracks and seized the most strategic position on the island across the Nicosia to Kyrenia Road, the historic jugular vein of the island. They retained control of that road until 1974, at which time it acted as a crucial link in Turkey's military invasion. From 1963 up to the point of the Turkish invasion of 20 July 1974, Greek Cypriots who wanted to use the road could only do so if accompanied by a UN convoy. 700 Turkish hostages, including women and children, were taken from the northern suburbs of Nicosia. The violence resulted in the death of 364 Turkish and 174 Greek Cypriots, destruction of 109 Turkish Cypriot or mixed villages and displacement of 25,000–30,000 Turkish Cypriots. The British Daily Telegraph later called it the anti-Turkish pogrom. Thereafter, Turkey once again put forward the idea of partition. The intensified fighting, especially around areas under the control of Turkish Cypriot militias, as well as the failure of the constitution, were used as justification for a possible Turkish invasion. Turkey was on the brink of invading when U.S. President Johnson stated, in his famous letter of 5 June 1964, that the U.S. was against a possible invasion and stated that he would not come to the aid of Turkey if an invasion of Cyprus led to conflict with the Soviet Union. 1 month later, within the framework of a plan prepared by the U.S. Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, negotiations with Greece and Turkey began. The crisis resulted in the end of the Turkish Cypriot involvement in the administration and their claiming that it had lost its legitimacy. The nature of this event is still controversial. In some areas, Greek Cypriots prevented Turkish Cypriots from traveling and entering government buildings, while some Turkish Cypriots willingly refused to withdraw due to the calls of the Turkish Cypriot administration. They started living in enclaves in different areas that were blockaded by the National Guard and were directly supported by Turkey. The republic's structure was changed unilaterally by Macarius, and Nicosia was divided by the Green Line, with the deployment of UNFICYP troops. In response to this, their movement and access to basic supplies became more restricted by Greek forces. Fighting broke out again in 1967 as the Turkish Cypriots pushed for more freedom of movement. Once again, this was only settled after Turkey threatened to invade on the basis that they would be protecting the Turkish population from ethnic cleansing by Greek Cypriot forces. In order to avoid this, a compromise was reached in which Greece was forced to remove some of its troops from the island. Georgios Grivis, leader of the EOKA, had to leave Cyprus, and the Cypriot government lifted some restrictions of movement and access to supplies of the Turkish populations.